Hey there, I'm Crystal Kate Bonham, the executive producer of The Kevin Roberts Show, where we know the real battleground for America's future isn't in the halls of government. It's at your dinner table, on your front porch, and in your church pews. What you do every day matters more than anything that's happening in Washington. As Reagan reminded us, national renewal starts with us, our courage, our strength, our faith, and our hope. Today's special episode is packed with conservative heavyweights like Michael Knowles, Victor Davis Hanson, Tulsi Gabbard, and Tim Kennedy. Get ready for a compilation that's sure to inspire and empower. Enjoy the show.
Happy to see the conservatives beginning to unite on after some decades of confusion. We really bought into a lie peddled by the left that we could have a culture and a polity without any standards, without any norms, without any taboos. And of course, they never really believed that because they had all their own standards and norms and taboos. But they told us we couldn't have ours. And so you're seeing all this scaremongering about Christian nationalism, or I don't know, whatever, the melding of church and state or something. And but of course, if you have any familiarity with American history, if you read the Founding Fathers, if you read the Framers, if you read I think what it was at the third or fourth stanza of the national anthem, conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, and God is our trust. If you look at our currency, if you're at all familiar with the American nation, you recognize that, to quote John Adams, the general principles upon which independence was won were the general principles of Christianity, and he goes on to endorse them. No country can do without a religion because law is the application of morality to civil affairs. So it's going to be theirs, or it's going to be the morality that inspired every wise statesman throughout the entire history of our country.
The first big thing that I was really worried about was around 2000, and it was globalization. I like the idea that people in the Amazon got antibiotics, or they had glasses in the Sudan. There was a lot of good to it, but this idea that we were all going to be cosmopolitan, a Greek word means citizen of the world, and we weren't going to be sovereign anymore. And we were talking about it in the faculty lounge. I think if this was ever reified, we wouldn't have a border. We would just consider that nobody was American, and I even wrote a book about it called Mexifornia. There would be no California, and then I'd realize that the people on the coast where the universities are and the capital are, they had skills that were transferable to a 7 billion person audience: media, law, finance, investment. But the people in between, and the San Joaquin Valley was in between, I noticed that all of a sudden the Fruhoff truck shut down, and the upright harvester, and the cow-can, and the Del Monte cannery, and all these people I went to high school with who were making more than I was as a graduate student because they'd been actually working for 5 years, they were wiped out. And so we just wiped out construction, farming, mining, all of these essentials. But then the worst thing about it was we created an artificial exegesis. We said, well, the people who made all the money, these huge fortunes, they were the smart people. And the dummies were the guys who worked with their hands and welded and were long-haul truck drivers and fracked. And so we had the values. And then just to finish very quickly, I don't think that we ever have truly given Barack Obama his due for the damage he did. We were making enormous progress toward racial ecumenicalism. The moment I read about his grandmother, who skimped and saved, worked her way up to a bank vice president and spent her money to put him in prep school, and then he turned around and called her a typical white person. And that started this was like tearing off a scab of racial ecumenicalism and going back to tribalism. And he really, whether Michelle, they raised the bar. I've never been proud of America. This is a downright mean country. Reverend Wright, Trayvon Martin, it was just constant racial essentialism. And I think it did a lot of damage. And so if we didn't have what we are, we'd have to invent it given what's happened. And I think the Obamas and the people around them are still in control of the government.
There was so much free speech and different ideas and different backgrounds. The party that stood up for civil liberties, the party that had leaders in it who called for an end to unnecessary regime change wars in other parts of the world. What I saw over time was a party leadership elite who became more concerned for themselves than for their purpose, for why they were put in these positions of power in the first place. You know, what exactly drove that? I'm sure there are many different contributing factors, but all of them, unfortunately, have led to where we are today. And that should be of concern, not just to Democrats or Republicans or independents. It is of concern to all of us because it affects all of us as Americans. They're not discriminating against who is affected by their attack on our freedoms. Yes, today they are attacking people who they call MAGA Republicans. Well, I talk in my book in detail about who are these MAGA Republicans they're targeting. Well, I've met a lot of them, and they are maybe people who voted for Trump, maybe people who didn't vote for Trump, but they are the moms for liberty standing up and speaking out courageously to protect their right to have input over their kids' education. It is people who are standing up and saying, hey, no, I am not for censorship of free speech. I am not for the White House, the Biden White House, directing the FBI to push X or Facebook or these other institutions to ban certain Americans' voices. The list goes on, unfortunately, but the message in my book is sounding the alarm bells for these threats that we face today, because they are setting a new precedent. That if we allow them to get away with this brazen abuse of power that is directly targeting our fellow Americans, you may not be the one targeted today, but if we allow this to become the new norm, I guarantee you it's just a matter of time. It will be you, it will be your children, it will be your family and your freedom that you wake up one day and it's gone. And the country that we love is no longer there.
Barack Obama was created by wealthy coastal white elites and who had enormous resources. And they felt, I feel really bad that I'm so wealthy, but I don't feel bad enough that I'm going to give up my jet or put my kid in the public schools, but I'm going to latch on to this biracial, and he sounds like a white person. He grew up with white people, but he's going to be my totem, and I'm going to invest and push him to be as radical and authentic as possible. So the people pushing Obama to be radical were the leisured left affluent, and they really created him. And of all the pernicious people in this country, and I work with them, I think the greatest danger to this country are the bi-coastal degreed class that have utter contempt and hatred of the middle class. And it's so strange because I just reviewed a book, Rural White Rage, and that's the argument that all of us in the middle class or upper middle class or even the wealthy so-called white people are going to destroy America. And it's just full of I've never seen such pathological rage. When East Palestine had that toxic plume and Biden wouldn't visit it, Pete Buttigieg wouldn't visit it. It was almost contempt. And so I think that group is this wealthy, bi-coastal, credentialed elite who really came out well under globalization and then created this false narrative that they were so smart, they were the masters of the universe because they were so successful, and all the losers in between, they need to code, or we're going to shut down the miners of West Virginia and teach them how to do this. And it was really, they had nothing but contempt, and they didn't understand what America was all about.
You said, like, ask a child. She knows truth, and she will not spend a day with anyone ever educating her in any other way besides what truth is. We now kind of have marching orders. You laid it out for us, right? You can attend your school board meetings. You can run for the school board. You can get in the library. You can go and donate. You can obviously call your congressman. There's lots of ways to get active. But first and foremost, you have to be the head of the household. This country was built off of young men and women forging their existence out of the wilderness, fighting bears and Indians to build this nation. And at some point, we're like, I'm okay with somebody else telling my child what to think, and even worse, how to think. At some point, we're like, their belief structure on what to be true, whether it's a boy or a girl, I'm going to let somebody else dictate to them what that looks like. I'm going to let somebody else influence them about what they think they are. We have to take that back. How do we, as parents, take that back? How do we take back control of our own household, our own homes?
The most important thing is to have a very skeptical attitude of screens in our homes. Cell phones, televisions, computers. That's not an anti-technology screed, but to say that the in-person interaction, especially between parent and child, is the most precious, important thing in the history of the world. And while, yes, a good TV show, something on the computer, something on the phone can be good and augment that, it also can do the exact opposite. But the second thing is for us, and this sounds hokey, but it's really true. There's great social science data that proves this. Reinstate family dinner.
Yeah.
And look, any kind of household can do it. Doesn't matter what kind of marriage you have. If you don't have a marriage, if there are kids there, if it's just roommates who are in college, have family dinner. I mean, I get excited about this because there's so much data that shows if we just do that, but especially when kids are present, what happens? What happens at a dinner table? What happens at Thanksgiving? People talk. They ask questions. They challenge one another. You know, some families, all we talked about was politics and religion, right? The things you're not supposed to, but you might talk about sports. Ultimately, we walk away more joyful, even if there are some differences of opinion, right? More joyful because we understand that our family unit, our relationship with our kids, with our siblings, with our cousins, is far more important than anything any politician in DC will ever tell us. And the politicians know this too. So the last part is be really involved in your kids' school. If they're going to stay in a public school, be involved in the parent association, be helpful to the teacher. Sometimes helpful is asking them hard questions about why they're sending nonsense home.
Yeah.
There's a way of asking those questions that can pivot that into a friendship. And then if things go awry, go take it over.
There's something social and cultural going on since that assassination attempt that's been percolating under the surface and now has bubbled up. And basically what people are looking for is a return to a normal country. And we know this at Heritage from focus grouping we've been doing among centrist voters for the last year, that what they will say more often than not is, we just want to wake up in a normal country.
Yes.
And we don't know which political party we belong to, but we belong to the common sense one. And this is tied to your concept of civic liturgy, civic iconography, because these are the same people who say, I don't want to see the American flag on the ground. I actually want to have a barbecue in my backyard. I want to be off of work on July 4th. I want to have hot dogs that aren't 4 times as expensive as they should be, right? I just want to wake up in America. This is a moment that Americans have that doesn't come around very, very often, maybe once in a generation. And we really need to go out there and seize it. And we got to be practical about how we go about it.
Absolutely. And so images do a lot there. You know, there is probably no more overused word in the English language than iconic. Literally might be more overused. And people misunderstand literally too, because it refers to letters, which are symbols, so it gets very confusing. But iconic is overused. The photo of President Trump standing up, fist in the air, the lines of the photo perfectly composed, the American flag waving, blood on the president's face. That is an iconic photo.
It's literally iconic.
It is literally iconic, Kevin. And I do think that photo depicting that event will move voters. And it will move voters in some way because President Trump, whether you love him or hate him, is an American original. That guy is all America. Maybe you love America, maybe you hate America, maybe you've got mixed feelings. But you don't get a Donald Trump out of Italy. You don't get a Donald Trump out of Tahiti. You get a Donald Trump out of America. And so in a real way, I think people perceived the very near assassination of the president as the very near destruction of America. And consider the way that he survived. A completely improbable slight turn of his head, the nanosecond before the gunman pulled the trigger with just enough wind pulling in the other direction. The simplest explanation, really the only rational explanation I think that one can come to, is that the cosmos is so tightly wound, so finely tuned to God's ultimate ends in providence. That too speaks to the American tradition. You know, when our forefathers came here on the Mayflower, I like them so much I named a whole cigar brand after Mayflower. They came here, they had a real sense of their place within history, then later followed by John Winthrop, who views America as a shining city on a hill, a model of Christian charity. And Americans constantly, even those who were not totally orthodox, say, or moved further and further away from orthodoxy, but they still viewed God's hand as guiding America. I don't think that people who look at that picture, who saw the horrific and nearly catastrophic events of Saturday, I don't think they're thinking all of those things consciously. If I weren't sitting here talking with you, I don't think I would be thinking all those things consciously. But they get it. It just kind of permeates your consciousness as if by osmosis. That, I think, does move independence. And then at a more cable news style political way, what the near assassination of Trump did was took all the wind out of the sails of the Biden campaign, because the Biden campaign, and these are his own words, is premised entirely on the lie that Trump represents an existential threat to democracy, that Trump admires Hitler, that he is in some way the second coming of Hitler, and his political project is an existential threat to our sacred democracy and the Constitution and the country. The moment Biden said, "I'm so grateful that Trump is okay," he admitted that was all a lie, because you wouldn't be happy that Hitler was okay. You wouldn't be happy that the existential threat to your country were okay. So that campaign went away. There's nothing for people to glom onto. And does it move 30 or 40% of voters? I don't know, probably not. But people who just long for America with a flag in the air and a guy who, by the hand of Providence, is saved by a hair's breadth, that inspires people.
With the McCain and the Romney candidacy and maybe the Bush candidacy, we forgot the cultural and the social, and that life is more than just being able to eat. That's the essential. So we're market capitalists, but we sort of said, well, they can have the schools, and the universities are kind of, lotus eaters anyway. Who cares about them? And piece by piece, we seeded these institutions, and we said, well, we have the people. NBC's not that. Who reads the New York Times? And what a professor says in the faculty lounge will never filter down. Believe me, I can think about 1984, there were people in faculty lounges saying we didn't need a border, and this is the reification. So I think what happened is we seeded the cultural and social fields. So right now in conservatism, we've got to talk about civic education. We have to take a stand and say we have a great tolerance for single parents, for divorced people. We have a lot of tolerance for gay people, but there is a norm of a nuclear family with 2 children or 3 children, and people who chose that route are going to be the strength of the country. We have to make that stand without being, crueler to other people. Same thing with the military. We have 41,000 people have not joined the military. It's the biggest scandal in history. And it's because of the humiliation in Afghanistan and the DEI. And you look at the people who are not joining, it's the white rural male. And then you look at the people who died in Afghanistan, 74% white rural male, twice their numbers in the demography. Who died in Iraq, 73% white rural males, twice their demography. So here you have the Pentagon saying we're going to investigate Lloyd Austin, Mark Miller. We're going to investigate white rage and white supremacy. And then they come back 2 years later, this December, and they say, oh, by the way, we didn't find any. Well, you destroyed people's desire to go serve. And so that was an issue that on the conservative side, somebody should have said, why are you attacking a demographic on the basis of race when there's no evidence that they're racist? And there is a lot of evidence that, contrary to what you think, they go to god-awful places like Kandahar or Fallujah, and they die at twice their numbers. And yet you're demonizing them collectively. So what I'm saying is that we're afraid to take on those. I know when I wrote columns about that, I got so tired of these 4-star generals writing me, shame on you. You are racializing the dead. And I said, no, you racialize everything about the military. Every promotion is in racial terms, but you never talk about the dead. And when somebody talks about the dead, and then you go crazy. Shame on you.
The Kevin Roberts Show is brought to you by more than 10 million supporters of the Heritage Foundation. The executive producer is Crystal Kate Bonham. Sound design by Lauren Evans, Mark Guiney, Tim Kennedy, and Joseph Fonspakowski. For more information and to subscribe, please visit heritage.org.